we make the soul of India expansive, wider, greater, so that the women status comes to the ideals that we had, our ancestors, our rishis and our sociological thinkers had envisioned for the future society. We have to go back to the idea of a sense of what Indian cultural view was of what is a human being. So essentially, if a human being is a soul expressed through the outer instruments of body, life and mind, and at the essential level, there is no difference across genders. We have to go back to this ideal and use this as the basis, as the starting point for formulating all kinds of policies, all kinds of patterns of thinking regarding the status of girls and women in the society, whether it is in the field of education or in social sphere, things like freedom, liberty to live freely. Again, going back to the ideals of the past, we have evidence in our texts of assemblies, of social gatherings which would not take place without girls or women present there. So girls were allowed this freedom to move, freedom to choose even their life partner, the person who was going to marry. There is not just the tradition of Swayamvaras, the princesses choosing their own partners, but even in the ordinary society at levels of general community level, there was a lot of flexibility and options given to girls of marriageable age to congregate with men, to meet men in various social gatherings and make choices. Again, the idea was also there that some sort of parental consent or consent of elders was considered necessary. Why? Because again, it goes back to what was the cultural understanding of the place of marriage in human life. So let's talk about that a little bit to understand a little bit more about the status of women in the past and what it means for us to create new ideals, greater ideals, as Sri Aurobindo puts it, for the future. So in the Indian system of individual development or societal development, community development, there are an individual is supposed to go through 4 phases of life: the student phase, the householder phase, the social recluse phase, and the phase where he or she is devoting his or her time exclusively to spiritual pursuits. Marriage was not seen as simply a way for physical, sensuous, selfish pleasure. Though the pursuit of kama as a goal was accepted as a legitimate goal in life within the context of this grahast stage, but that was not the exclusive reason for why people would get married. Marriage was a means for people to come together and grow in the pursuit of dharma, which is why we have terms like for the wife as sahadharmini, the one who walks with the husband in the path of dharma, sahadharmini. So this understanding of marriage was very different. The ideal was very different at a certain point of time. But then we are not living in those times. Those ideals have also changed. And we have to look at what is happening today so that we can understand whether there is a possibility of a new ideal for the present and for the future. As time progressed, from the Vedic to later Vedic to the age of epics, Ramayana, Mahabharata, and the Puranic age, if that's the way we understand the inner history of India. As I mentioned earlier also, there was a gradual decline in the status of women, which also included lowering of the marriageable age, which had a disastrous effect on the status of girls, because that had a direct bearing on the educational opportunities that were offered to the girls or to young women. Be that as it may, as the decline continued and it became worse and worse with the growing invasions as culture, as society went more into the self-preservation mode. As was mentioned before, women were the first to be disgraced. A lot of opportunities were taken away. A lot of freedom was taken away from the women. But the time is now to go back to the core, the essential aspect of what it means to be a human being. The true inmost being, the soul, that can blossom only in full freedom. So any measure, any social practice that takes away or denies full freedom to an individual is a practice based out of ignorance, based in falsehood, and has to be rethought, maybe removed, has to be totally eradicated or reformed so that the individual will have full freedom to blossom. In this regard, I have one very interesting and very important quote from Sri Aurobindo, which he actually said this to a reporter who had asked him about his views on widow remarriage or some other thing to do with the status of women and the need for social reforms. And he mentioned, Sri Aurobindo said this to the reporter, "I can only say that everything will have my full approval, which helps to liberate and strengthen the life of the individual in the frame of a vigorous society and restore the freedom and energy which India had in her heroic forms of greatness and expansion." Thank you.